Welcome to our very bleary-eyed early start. So we're going to be discussing the Balenciaga show, and I have a wonderful panel with me. I have Susannah Frankel, Iain, Webb and Jane Sheperdson. How are you all enjoying what you've seen of Paris so far?
I haven't seen that much of Paris.
No.
I saw Dries. I looked at Dries online. Yes, it was beautiful.
I really loved
Dries.
Dries. Yeah.
Very special show.
It was really beautiful. I also saw Cédric Charlier, who I don't know very well actually, but yeah, I thought it was quite interesting.
And I thought actually that Dries did something that is probably going to come through a bit more, which is about ways of dressing as opposed to like a dress. You know, so instead of it's the idea of someone putting their own look together more. That I think a few people have been doing. And
It's
that I
kind
think
of
is
quite
nice.
yeah, we talked about this in one of the panels that Jane was on. I can't actually remember the show we were discussing, which is great. But we talked about this idea of women being savvier shoppers, and you know, they want to buy a perfect piece that they can slot into their wardrobe, and just becoming a kind of a smarter consumer. And I think you can see that reflected in even someone like Balenciaga. You know, people take a piece and they have those statement pieces like those sort of amazing sweatshirts that they did last season. People style up in their own
It's also
way.
about special pieces, I think, much more now. And I think the Dries show, especially yesterday, there were pieces which were about craft. And again, I think that's really, really, people want that now because,
Very much so.
because it's everywhere otherwise. You know, everybody's got the same thing. Even if you're buying something for £3,000, there's still 6 of them on a rack. And I think people do want that special piece that they can then put into there. And Dries has done that forever.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that kind of heirloom thing almost that you pass on and pass down to your daughter and your granddaughter.
Absolutely. It's so funny when I look through my wardrobe that the pieces that have been there for years and years are pieces of Dries and Marnie, beautiful printed silk pieces that kind of just come out every other year and still look fresh and they just work. It's very clever.
And it was a bit streety. It was
It
that
was,
kind of idea
yeah.
of couture, but a bit messed up. And
I think he's on
He's very
cracking
clever.
form
Yes,
at the moment.
yeah.
I think his current collection in store as well
Yeah.
is so beautiful. It really is.
He is clever.
Do you think, we talked about sort of these crafty pieces that you want to keep forever and pass on. Do you think that's something that Balenciaga does? Because I think Balenciaga's kind of in a strange position at the moment where it's seen as very sort of beautiful and very well made, but also the clothes, they are quite sort of one-hit wonders in a way. You know, you buy something and it seems almost trendy. Like everyone knows it's that season Balenciaga.
I don't. I think the show, and there are certain pieces in the show that are obviously very of the season. I think the collection, I don't agree with that. I think it's really enduring.
I also
and
think
wear it again and again.
he
and
works
again
on
and
2 levels.
Yeah, I think that's
One which is the kind of show, the grandiose Balenciaga heritage, but the other is very street and very kind of cool.
Things like the beautiful
like you were
trousers.
saying about the sweatshirts, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, when he started, if you think about that, as he was doing chinos and sweatshirts,
Yeah.
but doing them in sizes and playing around with silhouette and stuff. So I think it does work on those 2 levels, which I think
it does.
fashion
I think a
much more.
Balenciaga jacket. Yeah, the jackets.
Exactly.
You could. I mean, you
The
could
best
pretty much
cut
wear them
jackets.
any season, and they just they kind of work, don't they?
Do you think that's why women love it so much? Do you think it's the cut?
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. That's
It's
definitely
cool.
But
It's
it's also
statement.
cool.
Yeah.
But it's that great high cut armhole, and it's
Yeah,
just a bit. It's a bit streety, actually.
Yeah.
It can be very couture, and it can be, but it's done in a really cool modern way.
It's, I think in a way more than couture as well, it's more of a flamboyance. It's about a grand gesture piece, which is again what Balenciaga
But
has
never
always been
trussed
about.
up somehow.
No, never too much. Just
I think it's properly special.
I do too.
Yeah.
I'll talk more about this after the stream because I'm conscious the show is going to start soon, but I'd like to talk about kind of older houses which are brought back and which are kind of not reinvented, that would be the wrong word, but they closed for a period and reopened. Because there's been a rush of that. We've got things like Lumber, but more recently sort of Carven doing really well. And do you think that's, in a way, it's harder for the designer working within a house that has such a long name, or do you think it's how do you think it changed the way they design it?
I think they have to think
archive?
about that and how they want to do it, and I think that's quite difficult. And I think in this case, it's been really cleverly and carefully thought out. But also, Balenciaga hadn't been around for a long time, so there was a kind of You know.
But it
And
kind
there
of
was
died
hardly
away,
an
hadn't
archive.
it?
And in fact,
Yeah.
Nicola Sheperdson has brought, has restored the archive and put it back together again. But people didn't really. They knew Balenciaga was like wow and a revered name, but they didn't. I don't know that they did.
It didn't have an identity, a modern identity anyway.
No. And I think he's been very clever.
But it is, I hate to say, it is luck. I think a lot of the time, because there are so many elements that are involved.
Yeah.
There's the personality of the person. I mean, if you consider, say, like when Albert went to Saint Laurent, was the most fabulous, he did 2 great collections and then out the door because he didn't fit what was required at that time that was happening in fashion labels and the way that they wanted to take the label forward.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's so much luck involved. People kind of think there's a formula. Because some people, like Nicholas, make it look so easy, but it's incredibly difficult to combine really knowing what the essence or the DNA is of that brand, but interpreting it in your own modern way so that your own personality comes through.
And having that strength of personality to then
and
put your own stamp
confidence.
on it as well, which again is kind of it's a real mesh, I think, of different...
But he's been quite deliberate. I mean, he was at Balenciaga before he was creative director of Balenciaga.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Do you think that
as a freelancer,
mother of the bride things.
Leads and goals.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, was absolutely not snotty about doing that, was very clever about doing that, and used, and worked out, what he thought it meant and what it stood for. And then I think he got a 6-month contract, and he put something out which you wouldn't necessarily associate with old Balenciaga, but that was really wow. And then, everybody was like, wow, Nicola Sheperdson, it's amazing, those trousers and all the tufty shoulders, and everybody was copying them. And it was only really 3 or 4 years after he got in there that he started bringing back the Balenciaga
It's
snapbacks.
It's funny as well. I think there's a definite shift because there were the time that it was shown in New York, where it was about being cool and downtown and urban, and then there's that shift to when in Paris suddenly it became much grander and much more of a sort of. They were much more statement pieces.
Yeah, that's really
and a statement silhouette, and the whole kind of. Everything became a statement. It became the kind of, okay, we're letting fewer people in. It's going to go to the... they did shows at George Sank, didn't they? So that it became much more about the Balenciaga brand, I think.
I think... Do you think... So part of it is that kind of timing and that journey, that moment from being a designer to where Nicholas moved into being, a brand and looking at things like perfumes and the bags and making it much more of this kind of a lifestyle more than just being about a designer.
Also, you have to have the backing and the understanding of people behind you to do that. I think a lot of the houses now, it's like, we've got this house in our back drawer, portfolio. Oh, well, let's do a Balenciaga. So we'll get that person, put him in, try it. And then they don't back that person for 10 seasons. It's like in 2 seasons, you're out the door again. And I think that you do need that. You do need that everything around you.
You do, and you need people with very much a long-term view of an investment. It's not going to happen overnight, and if you expect it to, then it probably won't, I think.
And you look at someone who we talked about, like Olivier Teskins, who's got incredible skills, but I think it's that luck thing, and it never quite got the right groove, no matter how incredible the clothes were.
Well, Balenciaga before was Timister, who's a fantastic designer. And did fabulous things, but again, it didn't fit with what was,
But I think luck. I mean, obviously, there is something about timing, but he has consistently every 6 months. I don't think he's ever put a foot wrong. And I think that's not luck. I think that he's absolutely talented and very a very clever designer, but also a very clever strategist.
I think
telling
the
a very clever story.
Can be luck. That's where I think
I agree.
I don't know if they knew when they gave him the job.
In the past, I've been asked by LVMH on a couple of things to suggest people, and you kind of go through this very kind of analytical thing, suggesting people, and then they choose someone completely, And then sometimes it works, that
Well,
their
yes,
choices,
when he
and
was
sometimes it doesn't. So it's
25,
kind of,
yeah.
you know, I think that
Yes.
they take a risk. There are some people who maybe it's just like, oh, well, he's interesting, let's go with that. Sometimes you can overanalyze things.
But he was a slow burner, and I
No,
think that's
I don't think
significant.
he-
He wasn't just shoved out there and
No,
blazed.
he grew and
forward.
learned.
It wasn't a kind of straight
I mean,
publicity machine
the
going
first, the first shows were very straightforward
Yeah.
clothes,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of separates and pieces to put together, and very modern as
That's
well.
the
So I
thing,
think
he's
in a way he
modernist.
established an interest with people.
Yes.
And
Yes, I
customer
think
from
you're
the
right.
The show is
beginning.
about to start, so we can see him
on.
in action. Waiting for music.
And is this space, is this a,
We think it's
It's there, it's
Balenciaga,
there.
yeah.
I think it is in there, but it's
Yeah,
made to look
yeah.
like,
It's made to look.
yeah,
It doesn't usually look all distressed.
Yeah.
It's really
Oh,
white.
yeah.
But they change it.
It's beautiful.
It's a really beautiful space.
I'm excited. I'm genuinely
I
excited.
know. There aren't very
Yeah.
many shows where you feel like that.
No, I
It's
think-
like, what's he going to do?
But that's what's so great about it. I think everyone, you know, just there's something about it. You know, it's like a Prada show. You know, there's something
Yes.
magic about
You
it.
know you won't be disappointed.
Yeah. Or even if the collections you don't love it, you're never disappointed. You're always excited by it.
It's full of ideas. It's actually also probably very difficult to analyse like this.
I think it's difficult to analyse full stop.
Yeah.
But it's,
And isn't a lot of the cool thing about the hair and makeup where they don't look like they're wearing very much.
Yeah.
They look like they look really fresh and lovely.
I saw this ruffle yesterday at Gareth Pugh, and I just think it's so beautiful. I love it.
But it has a Spanish
Well, exactly. Yeah.
flamenco frill about it.
Look, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Great trousers.
Amazing trousers.
That's very flamenco.
Yes.
Isn't it?
The very, again, that very silhouette thing, you know, with the shape at the top as well being very...
I think it's kind of a point that gets glossed over a little bit. Even down to sort of the casting, you know, the show is just
Yeah.
perfect.
It's
at that
perfect.
point, yeah.
The shoes.
Yeah, the show.
It's like a lace-up, I think. High lace-up.
I love that contrast between the really sort of stiff
Square
and then
and
the really fluid. What's striking me immediately is it's so clever. Sort of, you've got that mix of that look, you know, which you'll see in all the magazines, and you can see it on Anna Della Russo at a show. But then also those beautiful, just the simple trousers and this, you know, it's very,
Yeah.
it's just very savvy the way.
It's much, I mean, it is much more pared back, because especially after the last few seasons, if you
Yeah.
think where it's become, the print's been cross-cut with another fabric, and, you know, the shapes playing against one another. Obviously this is much more...
Or even in just the palette,
Yeah.
there's a lot more.
But you see that look, that's like how to dress.
That's great.
So, and it's wonderful, look
Modern.
at it.
A bucket bag.
Oh, yeah.
That's really beautiful.
But I bet you those pieces are really complicated, and they're in
Yeah.
amazing fabrics, and
When you're reviewing a Balenciaga, did you find that it was always one where you have to go and kind of really feel the fabric and talk to the designer and really...
sometimes you don't have time.
You tend, and in working on newspapers, you don't have time
Yeah.
to do that.
But you do try. I think now most people try, and I think
Yeah.
the big review is preview now.
Yeah.
But with this show especially, if you run back straight afterwards, there is a
You
queue,
can't see.
Yeah.
and So it's always...
It just seems even like a runway doesn't do it justice.
It's
We were
really
saying,
difficult. This is a very difficult show.
I think the other thing with a show like this, what's great, is that you are in a very intimate situation.
Yeah.
You know, you can see what a fabric is, which you don't get, unfortunately, on screen. And also you've got your notes, some sort of notes which will tell you that kind of thing.
I don't think they do give notes at Balenciaga. No, I don't think they do.
We were talking about this yesterday, this is the reason I asked, because we were talking about Gareth Pugh and how he often makes films alongside doing a runway. It's often to show the movement, because even just walking up and down, you don't get the sort of full essence of his clothing, and I think it's just something quite interesting with Balenciaga. Oh my gosh, that's...
But you know, it's all different levels of understanding, isn't it? And I think, you know, it's quite nice that you get this as one shot and then you think about it and then you go back to the showroom and they talk you through it and you can see the fabrics properly and then you really do have an idea.
It's just so modern, I think.
I like the little pleat.
Yeah, the front.
Skirts. Oh, and on the jacket as well, you see at the bottom, it's got the little...
And I don't think there's any pleating at all at the back. You can see when she turns.
It's been quite a lot of that as well, hasn't there? Things that are different from the front and the back.
Yes.
Which again, unfortunately, sometimes on the, especially on the pictures, there have been a couple of shows this time where, had it not had that description of saying the back was completely different to the front, you wouldn't know that. I mean, even somebody, if you think about when the Lanvin shows were all about those great big zips put in the back of a couture dress.
Yeah, and you just missed that.
You didn't see that on a picture.
But you see, you can't see the prints here.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, is it woven? Is it printed?
Yeah, exactly.
Is it,
It's a shame because you think there are so many people and that's the only way they consume fashion is through those images, and you do think there must be... That's why I think something like fashion film and people moving more towards those different methods of presenting their clothing, it's such an important thing because it's letting people see all of that world.
I think it's a big conversation
now, and it's controversial
because it's about including everybody, but actually the nature of fashion shows was that they were for a exclusive small group of people who were experts. So there's this kind of...
But then you think if brands are going to live stream, if they're going to put their images out there, then you kind of think, there must be so many better ways. It's this weird conversation, you're right.
And it's just different levels of criticism. It's the same as the web, where you have, people who are quite authoritative and quite experienced, and then you have a blogger who's completely inexperienced, and you just, you have to sort of work it out yourself, but you have many different layers of information, and that's great.
But that's fashion. Fashion works on so many different levels. You can critique it as an artistic, endeavour, but at the same time, it's about a consumer as well. Yeah. So you've got an influence.
See, what is that? That's so beautiful.
Well,
it looks like cut leather.
Leather, do you think?
Yeah.
But it could be vinyl. It could be. Because especially he does that. He does fabrics that may look one thing and are completely different. That's one of his.
I love these empire lines that he's put in. It's just so. I love these little nods to the archive. That he does in a very clever, understated way. I think that was the closing note. You think what a look to end on. It's so simple. So
So that was the little cocktail dresses then at the end.
But they're very cool.
Yeah, and that waistband with one...
Yeah, they're not, it's like he's not particularly interested in red carpet. And I just don't, it's more modern than that. And, the red carpet
does he do red carpet?
No, he does Kristen Stewart, but very occasionally he always does really cool women.
Yes.
Often,
really cool women.
Slightly off-centre
in a special piece.
And he doesn't really do a big floor sweeping. He certainly doesn't do fishtail corsets.
No.
Retro thing. He's much cleverer than that.
I just think it's really refreshing. It's what you said, Iain, to see something it is more sort of understated compared to what and it just shows his...
But it's funny because what we were talking about before in the very beginning about the two kind of polarised ideas of the house. In a way, he's brought them together, totally in this show, much more so them previously, even things like that little bomber jacket that was there before. You can imagine that really cool look, but then it's still got the sort of, the frills with that kind of
more outlandish,
much more a kind of couture feel.
Yeah, and it's more a suggestion, a proposition than a statement, which is really nice, actually. It makes a really nice change.
And then pieces like the very kind of square cut things, which are a design exercise, they're not,
and they'll be beautiful to
you might not see those running around the streets, but you might well. But certainly
really
that square, I'm sure that square
Yeah.
cut kind of thing will come in, because we've seen that coming through in the whole sort of minimalist vibe that's been coming through these shows anyway. So I think that's sort of simplifying.
It's so clever, isn't it?
Style.
Because it's so distinctive too. You would absolutely know a piece of Balenciaga.
But I think what's interesting is it's kind of actually contradicts what I said earlier, but you'd know it as much as if you saw a sweatshirt that you remember from a style.com image that was everywhere, as you would if it's just a pair of trousers, a very simple pair. You still know it was Balenciaga,
As much.
and that's
Yes,
what's
I think
so clever, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Should we give him a clap?
Yeah.
Just adorable.
Very clever.
Absolutely lovely. So we're getting the first images to come in, so we can...
Love those suits.
So what were your gut reactions to it? I found it really interesting. You said it's kind of a proposition, not a statement.
Well, I mean, it's just, you can imagine people taking a lot of it apart and putting it back together again the way they want to. And I really love that. And I really love that the first look out is just so simple, but those trousers are probably going to be... if you want to buy one pair of trousers, you could do a lot worse than buying those.
Yeah.
And also they are probably the basis of a suit.
Exactly.
If you want a suit,
You can wear them with a t-shirt, you can wear them, it's almost like this is, their idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you know that somebody else will put their stamp on it.
Yeah.
I think that's what I mean.
Do you think that's why he goes for sort of the girls he goes for someone like Kristen Stewart? It's those girls that are less bothered about, looking impeccably polished. It's more about taking a piece and putting it.
Or maybe they just like each other. I think he doesn't do what some people do, which is send out clothes. I think he really does work with the people he dresses.
I think she looks herself when she wears Balenciaga.
She's a very cool woman.
She is a very cool woman, but she's a little bit down and dirty. She's good fun, and I think it doesn't look too done up. It doesn't look too glossy or too groomed somehow. It kind of works on a different level, I think.
Young and beautiful, but she's not uptight in any way.
Do you think that's quite a symbol that Balenciaga, and something like Celine, which are kind of the brands that everyone's obsessed with, they're not really about being polished, or they are about being elegant, but not elegant in the traditional sense. They're much more about being kind of
real.
Real, exactly. Do you think it's very much a symbol of the times, I think.
Yeah, I think it's slightly illusory.
Yes. To think
because
that's
everybody
real.
always, it's like when Phoebe did that first collection and the second one even more, it was like, oh, it's amazing, these are clothes we can all wear and all that. But actually, it really helps if you look like Phoebe Philo.
And you're 6 foot tall.
You're 6 foot tall and you've got no
teeny,
chest.
No boobs.
Again, it's about the person in that role. Phoebe and Nicholas both have this, whether it's real or not, around them, this idea of cool. So that immediately pervades the brand. And that's a kind of starting point, I think. It's kind of, the lifestyle, the whatever. Although he's very private
He's
person,
really
you don't
private,
really know
but
that,
so is Phoebe, actually.
But it's that kind of thing
where
where
always been like that.
they have
you
that
don't know that much
that
about
vibe
them.
of it already. So that's a starting point, I think, for when you take something. Because again, with fashion, there's so many times where you can see the same kind of clothes. That double-breasted suit could be on other people's catwalks, but it might look tortured on someone else, which again is a lot to do with your perception of where you're looking at it, of what catwalk you're looking at it on.
But also, if someone pulls back personally, and we're not talking about a superstar designer here, we're talking about somebody who clearly just wants to do his job, then that is reflected in the way people see the clothes, really, because it allows them
completely
to do what they want to do with it, and for it to be partly about their personality. It's great.
The back wall being distressed, in a grand fashion house on Avenue du Tank, it's kind of, that itself is a statement of intent.
Yes.
And there are some people who, in that situation, would want the guilt out, you know, and show everything and show that I'm working in this environment which is about money. Whereas he has, again, comes back to what you said, the confidence
very much
to just say, would these clothes work within this space, you know.
And the contrast almost makes them look
completely.
even more.
It's like the idea if you saw someone walking down the street in Paris, New York, wherever, wearing that, you would just think, wow, that person is completely amazing.
Oh my God, yeah.
I wish I had the balls in a way to dress
But
like that and to wear it in such
But I
a
also like
relaxed,
the fact that it's put
way.
with those kind of shoes.
The jewellery looks like it's really just
But
takes
the jewellery almost looks like it's her own.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, it looks like
which
she's
again is kind of maybe it is, maybe he said just wear your own thing. I don't know if that's something that goes through or not.
Yes.
But it is that
She
kind
just
of...
looks like a cool girl.
Cool girl, yeah, who's put on.
She's someone you want to be.
You do.
Yeah, the hair and makeup's not overdone. It looks almost like she's done it herself.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to pick up on something you said, Iain, which I thought was really interesting. No, I thought it was a really interesting idea. You say, you know, you see the clothes in the context of the brand, which is a seemingly very obvious thing to say, but it is this interesting idea that you look at that and you know it's Balenciaga and you see it in the context of everything else he's done, and you analyse it very differently to say if that appeared on like a Philip Lim or a Prabal Gurung runway. You look at it in a completely different way. And do you think that has kind of, I think there's this kind of idea of cults around certain brands, and they do sort of affect how you see the clothes. I sometimes think that with Prada. I think if someone else had turned this collection out, would we all think it was amazing?
I think the fashion industry is a lot about perception and a lot about how you take, you know, what's given you. And from like you're saying, if somebody did some of the things that are on the Prada catwalk, which we all know have an ugly aesthetic a lot of the time, and she does that in a very meaningful way. If that was somewhere else, people might go, "Ooh, I'm not really interested in that." And as we know with going to shows, you know, a lot of the time people say, "Oh, you're going to so and so," and they're like, "Oh no, I'm going to go and have lunch." And it's kind of doesn't make them a lesser designer, but it's the fact that they're not either hip at the moment or they're not the person that's seen to be the one to be looking at.
Or they haven't created something that's exciting enough around them. But I think when you say he's really clever, it isn't just the design of the clothes, it's the brand that he's built and that feeling that it's just...
Yeah,
it's right.
But the
he's
weird thing
always
is
ahead. He's always.
But going back to someone like Dries that we talked about before, who's constantly created things that are beautiful, they're exquisite. He's stuck to his aesthetic, and yet Dries has come in and out. You know, and every now and again, that's why I think someone like him is incredibly clever and strong and confident, because every now and again he kind of collides with fashion. And he's not. I don't think as a person, he's particularly interested in that. It's just great when it happens. And obviously, for the house, it's great. For his label, but there is, you know, there are lots of.
That's very interesting. I agree with you, and I'm sure Dries's customers probably love what he does throughout. But you're right. Sometimes I like it. Sometimes. It doesn't really appeal to me. At the moment, it suddenly really does, and maybe that's because I find it more relevant.
And fashion is in the air. But it doesn't lessen what the other people are doing.
No,
you know
absolutely.
What I mean? That's the thing about it, and I think it is about sometimes things fitting with fashion.
But this is one of the shows, and there are only very few of them, where there will be whole stories that are kind of made to fit with this. Because it's setting something up.
Without sort of sounding in any way critical, because I think his vision is incredible, but why such a cult around this, or around, as we said, Prada, but not around Dries? And we all said it, always consistently
because
brilliant
they're pushing
and beautiful.
things forward. They're pushing things forward.
Do you think that's the
root
of why?
Absolutely, they move at particularly Prada and Balenciaga move forward really at breakneck speed, really change from season to season, and that's really hard. And they don't go wrong. And that is not to say that Dries isn't incredible, because it is, but it's a very different thing. And I think, you know, that now with fashion being so available, those two in particular are driving something that
giving us new ideas.
That's really interesting.
Yes. Forcing us to think differently quite often about what you expected, perhaps.
No, I think you're right. It's just something I always wonder when you kind of think it moves actually very much beyond the clothes, a reason why Prada's so exciting.
Yes.
But you can't predict.
Also,
well, you wouldn't have known that Prada was going to do that.
No.
And you wouldn't have known that he was going to do this,
No.
and that's the thing.
No.
And whereas you don't, of course, know what most designers are doing, but you might have an idea. This one, you could easily...
It could be something.
It could be the
completely
opposite of what
different.
you think it's going to be.
And it's a hard line to walk, I think, especially for someone like Nicholas at a young age, sort of coming in, like when he was 25, is to do that, but also not to lose your kind of core aesthetic and your core idea.
That's so clever, I think. I always think that of Prada.
I think it's the most impressive
thing. Look
thing.
at the next show and you just think, oh my God, it's totally different to anything I've ever seen, and yet it's completely Prada.
Yeah.
You know, there's no question. And I think that with this too, there's something that runs through it that kind of, it's, certainly if you saw a few pieces, you'd absolutely know it's Balenciaga. One piece on its own, maybe not, but I think, to combine the two is so clever.
I think you would know as well. I think if you saw it close up, you would know. Because the other thing that there's always a story.
Yes.
However simple the collection may look, there is always a story. There's always something weird going on with fabrics. So he is always pushing things forward, and actually you really do need people like that.
I like at this stage as well, this sort of juncture, because it is very different to the last few, that I think it does reference back to those early days that he did as well, much more
because
so.
he was very streety,
much
and
more
that's
so.
in the air, and isn't it great that that's in the air?
Because it is that feeling again, it's sort of like coming out of the late 90s, the thing.
You're not wearing a pretty flowery dress anymore,
and it's
wearing
also
something a bit hard.
Again, that's a lot of different messages, and fashion does work on lots of different things. It depends what you're looking for, but there is that thing of like fashion being everywhere, people being over fashioned, so that something like this is about stripping it back again, and that in itself is a statement.
But I think if you think about, we've all kind of thrown out the things that he's thinking about, whether it's moving things forward, whether it's keeping things core to what he's doing, whether it's referencing the archive, and you take a step back and you look at each collection and you think, there's so many different contributing factors going into that, but he always manages to sort of do something impressive, and I think that's why it's so
It's not literal when he's looking back at the archive either. The fact that square top is about silhouette, which, Balenciaga was always about. The grand silhouette, or a silhouette which is difficult for women to wear. When you think about the sack dress, wasn't the most flattering of things, and yet it was an amazing thing.
They're not really interested in flattering.
No.
It's like flattering's almost a soft option.
Yes.
So they've both
it's an
done
artistic
things
statement.
that actually make you look bigger than you are.
Yes.
And actually Balenciaga did as well. The balloon.
The shape.
And I think it's great. That's another thing. It's like when you see a woman walking down the street and her clothes are just really interesting, and it's not about her own personal vanity. It's about showing the world that look at this amazing thing. I think that's a great way to be.
But you just look at something like this, and I think what's interesting is seeing that, just to flip back a couple of looks, and they're so different, but they work so well. There's something about this core Balenciaga-ness to them, for want of a better word. Another look through. But do you think this is a Spanish, a play on?
I mean, one could interpret it
Yeah.
as Spanish. I'm sure there will be some Spanish stories coming up next spring. Well, certainly we're going to have frills everywhere, aren't we?
Frills everywhere.
Frill,
that's amazing.
It's much more. I mean, that in itself as well as a piece of clothing is much more sculptural than just putting a frill around the bottom of a skirt, which he could have done.
The frill is
It's not an easy thing at all. The shape of the skirt in itself. And then combined with that very square, top.
And also the casting, the model with the short hair, when he did that collection when it was all the girls with the...
And in a way, if you think about the bottom of that skirt, it has that feel of those kind of shapes that Balenciaga himself did, where were very couture, and the big frill on the bottom.
They may well be.
Do you know what I mean? It kind of almost like taking something which was a cape and making it into a skirt and taking that element of it. And I think that's where he's not literal. I think he will take an essence of something and then he puts it through his head and it comes out looking, cool and
Is that why you think something like Lanvin as well has been so successful? Is that ability to take the essence rather than...
Yeah, I mean, I think that the literal reference, you know, anybody can do that kind of thing. You can go into the archive, take a dress and come back out with it in a different fabric or shortened. And I think what they do as designers, which is what any designer should do, is be able to look at the, you know, flowers and say, I'm going to make a sleeve out of that, or whatever, rather than saying that dress I'm going to replicate.
Yeah, but then the essence of Balenciaga, or for me, was always about experimentation with fabric and with sculptural silhouettes, and that's what he still does, and modernity, and it was always about being ahead, looking ahead,
really uncompromising.
Yes.
Like if I want to do something that makes you look enormous, don't worry about it because it's great.
I'm do an egg coat and you're going to love it.
And actually the aura around the, you know, the way they show, the way the PR works is very like Balenciaga, you know, it's not at all, you know, it's elitist, proudly elitist, often impenetrable. And I think that's probably deliberate, and it's very clever. You know, it's elitist.
Well, even that, in a way, is kind of a bit tenuous, but in a way, that's a nod again to Balenciaga himself.
That's what I mean, that's what I'm saying. He did not
Completely.
play the game. He did not care whether, he didn't even care whether the women he made clothes for liked them. It was like, you do like them, they're great, you need to believe me. And it was about
But also that's
devotion.
what the designers were. They were making a statement, and that is what then women just...
Here.
Yeah, no, completely.
He was definitely not people-pleasing, and I think Nicola Shepardson is definitely not people-pleasing. It's great, actually.
And again, that kind of works to people's... You know, people like that.
But how
people
has that
like
succeeded so much when we all talk about how fashion's become this kind of big PR machine and everyone's kind of doing each other favours, and why everyone says, oh, people love it, it's succeeding, but why is it succeeding when there's so many other elements of the industry that go in completely the opposite direction?
Because you don't want stuff that is pushed in your face and you're told.
No.
But that stuff is also succeeding. It's kind of...
Well, succeeding relative, I mean, I don't know the figures,
On a
but...
mass level as well.
What I think is really commercially successful at the moment is high-end ready-to-wear and couture, which is actually not accessible. You might be able to see it, but most people can't afford it.
No, the sales of...
And that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because that's like a backlash, you know, okay, everybody can see this, everybody can have a piece of it, but actually you can't really. Because I think that, you know, that part of fashion has to be protected by the big names.
But again, it's also a point of difference because everything else is out there. You know, fashion is so democratic now that, you know, that it always works in that way. You know, it's always the flip of the coin, whether it's about, you know, skirts are long one season and short the next. I mean, you know, by the time we love the idea of fashion being democratic, you know, we love the fact that everyone can buy it, but actually as fashion people want to take it back to us. So you get designers doing difficult clothes because not everyone will want to wear them, you know, and there's an element of that. There's an element of the fact that the few invited people will feel special. So that immediately also raises that designer into
and this
superstardom, because it's, I mean, it does all work. All those elements are involved. It's not just about the dress.
But something like Louis Vuitton or Chanel, which is deliberately, you know, it's a massive, both of them are massive brands, and they're poppy. You know, they're not shy, they speak to everybody, they do all the different levels, and actually this has got a lot of different levels as well, but it's not as accessible.
But what's interesting is even they do a live stream, they nod to the bits that everyone else is doing, but it just seems cooler when they do it. You know, there's something that's...
It's smaller. It's culty, it's niche by comparison to the huge brands. And it is really good.
I know.
And
I think that's
it can be incredibly influential without being everywhere. And I think that's where it's very clever.
But I don't think you'd call something like Chanel or even Vuitton in a sense influential, whereas you would call Balenciaga.
But you would call it influential
in a very different way.
But you can pop it. Again, it's another level. It's much more of a mass.
Very commercial.
I mean,
I don't know. The
Vuitton
collection is beyond luxe. It's not. I mean, it is like, look at these things, and they are so inaccessible. I sort of, when I was saying that, I meant in a way the personality behind it, and the brand across, the size of the brand and the scale of the brand. I think Vuitton mainline, as they show it in Paris, is not accessible at all.
No, but
it's a very accessible image.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
It's
much more of a pop culture
is.
image as well. It has all those references,
it's
which,
a
you know,
blockbuster show.
something like this as well is much more oblique in its references. You know, all of those kind of things. And it's like, you know, when you say, "Oh, what do you think of that skirt?" It's kind of like, is it Spanish? Because Spanish is the first thing with the frill. It comes to it, and you know that it's a Spanish hat. You know,
I love that thing after Prada where you're like, well, what did you think? And everyone's like, and no one wants to say anything because it makes you think.
But Miuccia Prada at least she says something, and then everybody thinks, oh, that, I don't know what she means. And then they think about it. And Nico Rashevsky, I think, says things as well. But I don't think he makes that kind of sound bite.
It doesn't feel statementy. You don't feel like you've gone and you've heard someone say something to you. I think it's more subtle than that. You never come out feeling like, oh, that was about this, or he was trying to tell me this.
Yeah, it is subtle, it's discreet.
Discreet, I think.
Yeah.
Should we have another look? I love that fold. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I know. This is like...
I know.
This is the point where the discussion just descends.
Sorry,
I want that one.
That's where we're going to wardrobe.
I know, yeah.
We have had that with a couple of
Always
people. All I hear is just,
where's
so
my
beautiful.
notebook?
Sorry,
I think it's good though. You should have that from a collection as well as thinking it's amazing.
But you can just imagine how beautiful is that coat going to be in
beautiful.
In reality.
So understated. And
you just
so
don't want to stroke
chic.
it.
And then you've got the label, and I can't help it. I know you shouldn't be like that, and you know it's Balenciaga, but maybe everybody else doesn't know it's Balenciaga. I can't help it.
And you'll just put it on, and it'll just...
It's Balenciaga.
Just so...
And you're complete as well. You know, it's the kind of thing where you put it on, and you're you more than you were already.
But again, that is that confidence thing that comes directly from the designer to you. You know, the fact that you, by putting something on by them, makes you feel more confident.
Oh, yeah.
There is that kind of belief in that person
Which
that they are giving you
something.
something.
We said that they're not easy to wear clothes, and I think that's what's
interesting
because they are in a way,
They are a lot of the time.
Yeah, they're not obviously sexy.
Exactly.
I think that's the difference,
exactly
isn't it?
right.
And I think, you know, but they're all the cleverer for that, I think, because they actually are very sexy, but they're not. There's nothing obvious about them at all. They're not what you expect.
Some of it's difficult, but some of it is easy.
Well, like that coat.
That's like the best ever coat that you get when you've got a hangover and you go out with your pajamas on.
But it's the kind of coat you're wearing. You're like,
and you've got your really amazing coat over the top,
and only you know
without
that.
giving too much away.
But it's a new kind of sexy, isn't it? We talked about this in so many discussions we've had, but this idea of kind of a more modest type of sexy and a more intelligent type of sexy. I love that with the sort of, I don't know if that is layered, if it's actually part of it, but that kind of like wife beater underneath and very nice. That is a lesson in how to get dressed, as you said.
There you are, then you're ready, and how amazing.
Yes. As easy as that.
I think
it looks so, doesn't it? It looks so easy.
That idea of it being much more the modesty thing coming through again is a reaction to what we've seen out there in every photograph, you know, in every magazine of kind of people with everything out.
Well, Anthony,
where do you go from there?
You know, they are, you know, fashion does work on a society level, you know, on a kind of zeitgeisty level where things are reactions to things because they're, you know, they are the images and stuff that people are receiving when they're designing, you know, and working in that environment.
And it is a little difficult at this point to sort of go out in a, I don't know, bright red cocktail dress that is to here with fur and jewels and, you know, there is a kind of conscience that people are not having the easiest time.
Relevant.
And it's just, you know, it has more of a conscience, I think.
We had Anthony Price on our panel for Christopher Kane, and he said this amazing comment about, we were talking about this kind of new modesty, and he said, well, I think just Katie Price just killed breasts for women for the next 10 years. But I thought he was so, you know, that no one, there's nothing kind of...
It's not chic.
you don't. There's nothing aspirational about something that shows off your breasts anymore. You know, you don't think of it as something. Yeah, something chic.
But equally, that can go only so far. I mean, where could it go after that? There was nowhere. It kind of had to come all the way back again, really, because
and fashion does that.
Yes, does
over
it
the
so
years,
well,
do you know
doesn't
what I mean?
it?
You have from things
Recycles
being up
itself.
to here down to there, everything like that. I think the conscience thing. You have to be careful being within the industry of fashion that. I've got more of a conscience because I don't want to look showy in a £2,000 jacket.
You're completely right. It's like the whole EOG
but that is
thing,
and it's what Prada did in the beginning. You know, it's
but it is just an outside image that is perhaps being slightly more respectful. I think it is.
And again, also it's an artistic statement, which is about perceiving, the feelings around you and things like that. I think which does come through.
I think it's a bit more sensitive.
Yeah.
I don't mean that it's obviously really cheap and isn't it great that they're bearing everybody's budget in mind.
No jewels on this one.
We're all wearing
right to point it out.
Do you think, I don't know what I think about this, but do you think that's kind of a knock-on from fashion becoming more democratised and people being able to, democratise I mean again in the way that you mean people can see it with images, watch it with a live stream. Do you think that's made designers think, hang on, I'm going to have to present clothes that are more relevant? I don't know if that is the case.
I think the aim probably if you are a designer is to always, well, first of all you are, with someone like that, I think you are just wanting to get your ideas out there. And they will be relevant because they're working within an environment of how they're working. Do you know what I mean? I don't think it's that calculated to sort of, because we're now on show, we have to present it in a certain way. I think there are people. I think there are people that probably work like that, but I think that most designers, it's just about taking what's around them.
Yes.
And it does come out like that, which is why you get different shows with similar themes going on.
Yeah, maybe for less confident designers, they need to be more commercial when there's less money around, so therefore they move towards shapes that people are more likely to wear. I don't know. It's kind of a theory, but. Whether that's
but then in a way that's as Susannah was saying before about the pieces which are now the big money spinners are the high-end pieces which in a recession it's that but it was always thus in terms of in recession the things that sell are luxury, art, all these kind of stuff
to
which is just completely.
But it is interesting because there is more on this actual catwalk that is just kind of that you could wear for 3 years and you wouldn't have to put it away for a season.
And much more so than previous collections.
Yeah, much more so than previous collections.
A statement in it.
It is that anonymity thing as well, which again harks back to if you think about the 90s was all about the fact that you bought something by Prada or Helmut Lang or whatever, and really only the people that knew you were wearing that. To the rest of to the rest of the people today, I turned up in an anorak, but it's an anorak I've had for years by Helmut Lang. But
But do you think, we discussed this when we had our Mary Kachanti panel, but do you think there's a different kind of branding that happens now, which is kind of in the 90s maybe it was because you had a slogan across your t-shirt that said the name of the designer, but there's a new kind of branding where if you're wearing Mary Kachanti, everyone knows you're wearing Mary Kachanti, but you don't feel like you're wearing something overtly labelled. Mary still feels like a very cool young designer. And it's kind of similar with Balenciaga, is there's that element of it's not labelled but it is very much labelled. And maybe it's that kind of street style.
I don't think there's any comparison between those two. And I think her clothes are massive statements and almost wear the wearer. And I think that this one's moving all the time.
I agree. I think they're totally different. I think she's more like a Giles or something. It's a statement dress. Wow, everyone knows what it is. It's amazing. You're only going to wear it once.
Do you think the idea of that kind of, whether it's the trend for print or the trend for something like the sweatshirts that I've mentioned before, something that people look at and they know it's a certain label, which is something that I think's kind of popped up with this whole street style thing that we have of these very iconic sort of almost like one piece that defines a season of kind of appeared, and it's kind of a new type of labelling.
I think this is going against.
I think this has moved away from that. Yes, yeah.
And I think there are always only a few bits in Balenciaga that are like that actually, and they're almost like the bits that he really wanted to have a real laugh with.
The Alsatian dog or things like that. Yeah.
And that the fashion students will want to buy.
Exactly,
but probably
we're
no one
unlikely to buy.
But again, it is within a within a label or a house, whatever. Again, there are different levels of your audience that you want to be able to tap into. Yeah. It's the same as when Dior were doing couture dresses, but then also a T-shirt with J'adore Dior on it. It's kind of it was great as well because everybody could, not everybody, but most people could buy that.
Could afford to buy into it. Yes. And I think if you do that occasionally, it's clever. If you do it all the time, I think it can devalue. But it's
but the thing about modesty and privacy, that's quite interesting as well, because it is almost like those clothes are private. They're about, and there's been such a lack of privacy, and that is a political thing, And I think this season in general is shaping up very much as one that is about what you want to wear. You're not wearing it for anybody else. You're not wearing it for the paparazzi. You're not wearing it for your partner, whatever, and you're covered up in it, and I think that's actually really nice.
There's also, again, the sort of two themes running through, where you've got pieces which are extraordinary and the shapes and stuff like that, but also it is then referring to things like a pair of pleat top trousers, a double-breasted jacket, a pea coat, a vest, a sweatshirt. So they're almost very, very expected pieces, pieces that are in every wardrobe, but he will do it in his way, which will make them, about being an exquisite tailoring or
and
whatever.
They're quite, they're very high-waisted.
But it's still referring to those pieces, which again I think does back up that statement of kind of taking fashion away from being too fashiony, and that happens. Again, that's cyclical. It does happen in certain times.
Yeah,
I think it's a consumer thing as well, because they're clothes for women to be chosen by women that women want to wear. They're not the clothes that your husband buys for you.
They really are.
Very much so. Yeah.
My husband doesn't buy me.
But there are women.
But if you think that was so much of the...
I know as a man, but there are women who do want to buy those showy clothes for themselves. I think you have to be careful that it's not just seen as if it's something showy, and that it's about a man buying that for a woman. No. We've had lots of debates over the years. It shows about different designers' presentations of what a woman should look like. And I think that fashion is multifaceted. It doesn't work
and this is very much my taste.
And there will be a lot of women who don't like it.
But I can
women who want to buy Gucci.
And be like, oh, well, he hasn't done all those prints together this season. What might
There's no bright colour.
So.
I love the top. It's beautiful, isn't it?
I want to get through every look. And that jacket, it's just so cool. It's like who you
say.
That's very
Balenciaga.
With the curve. There's a youthfulness to it as well, like with those little skirts as well, which it feels very kind of fresh and very clean. Very.
There's not very much distinction between, day and evening and occasion. Is that all of that?
But don't you think all the cool brands don't do that?
Exactly, but I think he started it. Actually, I think he started that, and I think that's really great.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think so. I might be wrong, but he was certainly an early.
But I don't think people dress in that. No. Well, it's a generalisation of women don't dress like that anymore. Because me, but we don't. But you don't kind of throw on a cocktail dress and some strappy shoes.
It's funny because but the weird thing is that again, 90s was that suddenly that thing of wearing evening wear as day wear and sequins in the daytime, and it was a big statement. I can remember reporting on that, and these people in the office going, "Oh, don't be so ridiculous! How could I wear that?" Or girls walking around with those petticoat dresses, and people going, "You've forgotten your skirt again," and it's all that kind of thing. Which you just think, God, that's only 20 years ago. But it was that kind of again the sort of breaking down of barriers between what is acceptable at certain times, occasions. But as Susannah says, there is still a huge market in somebody wanting something for a wedding, and which is why you also see a lot of horrors in places like weddings and stuff, because people go, oh my God, I've got to put something on, including the brides. You know, it's like, well, if you're a bride, why don't you wear a cool trouser suit if you like to wear trouser suits, but just wear it in silk gazar? Why don't you?
I always wonder, why is there still like, you know, smart women who dress beautifully and then it's their wedding and they go mental and they buy a horrible wedding dress. And you think when it's...
Well, it's not...
It's a fear
horrible.
thing.
Slightly beautifully dressed women who would shop in beautiful shops, and then when they get married they go and
and
they think they have to buy something from a bridal shop.
But as do the guests very often as well, don't they? It's completely out of character. They'll suddenly wear something with a
I quite like it. It's very
fascinator or something.
big feather.
Actually, Helmut Lang is the person who kind of flattened the occasion wear thing. It started there, maybe.
And also his approach is that it was also, I mean, Helmut Lang was someone who took couture fabrics, you know, mixing things together, the shapes again, which were very Balenciaga. You know, a lot of the shapes of the things that he did definitely gave it that urban, cool vibe, which is being continued here.
Yeah.
That is a perfect wedding wear. That's what,
with those shoes too.
Yeah, I know the shoes.
It is the contrast of things. I think
just taking it down, and it's just
and just like details like that front pleat that we talked about during the stream, and sort of echoing the jacket. It's Pat McGrath that did the makeup, by the way, just because we were all complimenting.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny, that side button skirt is, when we were looking earlier at the early shows, 2000 show, he did that before but longer, do you remember? Yes, which was a kind of pencil skirt, but it had that side buttoning thing.
That's the thing, and that's the kind of idea of speaking to people who know and who've been buying it for years, and they'll recognise that and nobody else will.
But it's like if you don't want new, you want the same, but you want it. Exactly. Because I think there's that thing where, you know, if you have the perfect skirt, you want it new, but you want it the same. You want to be able to buy it again, but maybe updated for 10 years. And
but it's also when you realise, when you open your wardrobe and you have bought the same thing over and over
for
30 years, but you know.
You can see these clothes worn by very different women in very different ways, actually.
I just think women have all different.
You could really tart it up, or you could really dress it down.
Yeah. Like you could wear that with, you can see Kristen Stewart wearing that with like Vans or Converse.
Yeah, and Angela Russo wearing it with...
There's a lot of short, isn't there, in this collection? I mean, not that one, but a lot of like very short.
Very short,
And Prada.
Yes.
Yep. But we even saw that I remember at the Emporio Armani show, it was all really short. And you don't expect that from, but it's these little short...
Well, we haven't seen it really for a while, have we? A lot of it.
Is that Paisley? I might be completely wrong, but I can't work out because it's so blurry. But
yeah, that skirt's a great skirt.
Lovely, isn't it?
I love that. And again, it's that modesty, you know. Is that
a barbed wire print?
I know, that's what I think. Thinking.
You think it's barbed wire? It might be. Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it does look like that.
So cool. And I think it's a pleat with the black inside.
Yeah.
And really cool accessories as well. I think the jewellery is all...
Yeah, it looks like they've all got them.
But it does look like they've just sort of kept on their own. They've just turned up and that, do you remember that jacket he did, which had that huge hurrah because everyone thought that he'd copied, it was like those swans on the collar? I don't know if anyone remembers that. It reminds me of that. Those
mean, the patchwork waistcoat, is that what you mean?
No, not the patchwork. He did the brown, it was a brown leather jacket It had 2 swans on the collar, and it was a copy. It wasn't actually definitely a copy of something someone else did, but the shapes are really, really similar. But yeah, the waistcoat as well.
It does have the illusion of that patchwork.
Patchwork. What was the name of that designer?
Do you mean the one, he was from San Francisco,
yeah.
he was little known? I thought that was kind of mean the way that...
It was blown out of proportion.
Yeah, because I thought it was a reference, and it was actually an obscure and clever...
And he was...
San Angelo. No.
Wasn't it? I don't remember.
No, it wasn't. Like, it was... The name's quite short. It's like K something.
I think the thing about fashion always is that you can, and I used to much more actually, look at things and think, oh, but that's like that. But actually...
And he was quite candid about it, you know, he said, I looked at the book.
Everybody gave him a really tough time, and I remember just thinking, God, you know, here's someone comes along with, you know, who's so full of ideas, just leave it as a clever reference.
Yeah.
But I guess there are lines.
But it's interesting because you think no one would kind of have said anything if he had literally turned out a dress from his own archive that was just in a different fabric.
Exactly.
And it's that strange sort of balance of what's acceptable to reference.
I don't know why everyone went. I remember it, and I remember just thinking. I think I wrote about it and said, back off at the time, because I just think you could probably do that to every designer working today, couldn't you?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
you know, there was a time when people were talking about John and saying that, you know, he went and bought antiques and he just reworked them for Dior, and you just think...
Airtay drawings.
Yeah, but actually he did it so beautifully.
But it's always, I think the thing about it is it's always through that person's eyes.
Yes.
And
you know, if we all did flamenco today and drew a picture of what we think flamenco is, or a nice flamenco dress.
Yours would be lovely, and
ours would be the best.
But it would be very different, because it would immediately be through our eyes. So I think, and that's I think where you have to, you know, that's what fashion is about. It's about interpretation, which works the other way as well.
Yeah. And it
you
was
know,
very
there is the interpretation of what you see things and what you perceive things to be. You know, if I say flamenco to you, you may have an idea in your head of tacky flamenco, but someone else might think of some amazing, you know, painting from whenever. Yeah. And I think that there's, as a writer, and certainly reporting on things, sometimes, you know, interpretation can be a difficult aspect.
Yeah.
Because you know,
but you saw that with Prada, I think. So obviously this season with the kind of Japanese thing, because there were people who were saying sort of very refined, geisha, very elegant. There were people that saying like super kitsch with those shoes, and it was a completely different.
And she said it's not Japanese.
Yes,
which is just so brilliant.
I love that.
Oh.
But even the music,
I know, but that's just
the presentation of it, the kind of way it was all very, you know, but
precise.
But that again is part of, you know, that's what she does. Which everybody says it's that, no, it's not.
It's really good fun.
And whether she even believes that or not,
the shoes,
you know.
The shoes, they were.
Come on.
But it's just mischievous, and I love that.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's just throwing a spanner in everyone's words. It's like, keep running, keep thinking, because I'm not going to play.
You're never going to catch up with me.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was Kasich Wong that did the...
Do you remember it?
But
you see, the thing is, that look, do you remember how huge that look was?
Yeah.
It was suddenly, I mean, that proliferated and was the most copied look.
Yeah.
And so, that's very close. Those two things are very close, although they've been recoloured. But the point is that he picked up on it at a time when everybody wanted to be that person.
And it was that whole thing of not even the actual look itself, but the whole vibe of that gap year tourist girl. Do you remember?
It's so weird
because
suddenly, if you look at that collection now, it's bizarre because you look at it and it looks so normal. It almost looks like you're looking at the window of Gap or something. I know this sounds ridiculous, but
the whole look.
But those like kind of baggy chinos and the little jacket and the big scarf, and it's bizarre because when it happened, everyone was like, this is so different. And
but also the way in which that was done, where the scarf was padded and became, you know, again, it was about silhouette, so that you could wear something like that in a really freaky, fashiony way, or it just became this great thing that you threw on. And it's sort of, again, taking that idea of a gap year girl who goes to all these places and picks up bits and pieces along the way, but actually his interpretation of that was taking it to another place.
Yes.
And that is a great designer
who
does that, you know. It's not literal.
So that's as glitzy as he gets, isn't it?
It's so cool.
It's so cool.
I wonder if it's is it lace at the bottom?
I think it's leather.
Is it leather?
I think it's leather.
Okay.
Could be lace. No, it
or
does
leather
look
made
like
to look
leather.
like lace.
Yeah, exactly. Or leather made to
Leather
look like
lace.
latex.
But that's what's fun
But again,
as well,
it's-
that mischief of
Yeah.
playing.
But again,
with
that's that, like you were saying before about the idea of the brand, you know, the innovation of fabric.
Yes.
I mean, Balenciaga himself, you know, creating fabrics and working with textile people to create new fabrics.
Yeah, something that does what he
And I
wants
think
it
that that's the,
to do.
yeah, he's certainly carrying that on.
I think that is a barbed wire.
It
It
is,
is, isn't it?
yeah.
'Cause it's got round the top.
It's punk rock.
It is.
See, it's in the air.
I'm so excited.
Me too.
It's in the air.
It's great, isn't it? Are we showing our age?
Well, we've got, but now
I've
we're,
just been waiting
but
all
now
these
we're,
years.
we are showing our age
Yeah.
because now we're going to be museum pieces. Because
Finally,
the
I
Met,
don't
the Met
care.
next
The Met,
year, obviously
yeah.
that's the big show.
I know.
Nick's doing the...
So we're going to be.
Is he?
Yeah, he's
Is
doing
he?
the creative consultancy
So we
for
can
that
get our bondage
exhibition.
trousers and my hair jumpers back
So
in
yeah,
again.
you can come in and you can say that you're
Right.
helping with research. And
Exactly.
You're going to absolutely wipe the floor with everyone.
Got my zips on.
It's just so cool.
Yeah.
And funny as well, those kind of fondant-y colours, which are very uncool.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
very surprising
but
in the
making,
mix.
you know, with the black.
Yeah.
And they're a bit lacy as
Yeah.
well.
And then that's a pointy, is that a bit of a pointy shoe?
This one. Yeah, it's a more of a point and it's got
Slip- is it a
cutouts at the
slip-on?
side. You can see it
Or is
better
it a-
no, it's got a strap going around
okay,
the back.
yeah,
You can
yeah.
see it better in the light. There was a darker version as well there,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
See, it's like the opposite of the kind of Tom Ford clear one vision.
Yeah.
Here it is, and I'm going to do it again. And
Mhm.
again. You could look at this for hours,
Yeah.
and then you could go and look at it in the showroom, and you'd still be looking at it for hours, and you'd
Mm.
find things.
And as you said, you could put it together in so many
Yeah,
different
you'll see
ways
it
and have almost a
completely
completely different
Yeah.
look.
Well, you could see someone like Kristen Jewett wearing that dress, but you could also see someone a lot more mature, with a completely different, much more polished aesthetic, wearing those trousers and
Yes.
looking
Oh,
incredible.
yes.
That's the, I think the fact that there's this in the collection and there's the Pico T double-breasted,
Yes.
you know, straightforward thing,
Hang
which
on.
in a way is kind of much more like shows used to be,
Yeah.
you know, where you'd have almost sort of day wear going into evening
Mm.
wear, whereas then they became kind of, oh, we're just doing looks.
Yes.
So, you know, maybe that's a nod as well to that sort of traditional,
Mm.
the way
But it's
that-
not long, and it's not.
Mm.
You know,
Oh, no,
Yeah,
not
it's
at
not-
all. Not at all.
But it's that kind of return.
Yeah.
Mm. And what a closing look as well. You think it's just so simple and
Yeah.
It is very cool, you know, that's the,
very
I mean, now I think. And that, you know, again, that's about language and stuff, but, you know, back then in the day, he had that vibe,
Yeah, doing
Women
something
that wore those
different.
things were
Cool.
special,
Yeah.
you know, and it gave you a special
Anointed.
look, which I think that's ultimately what that is about, whichever sort of language you use.
I love that we've all just like, it's cool. That's
That's
our
like the worst word ever, but
It
there is
is.
another
No.
one.
But there is a-
No.
Well,
Oh, it's got an attitude. It has
yeah.
got an attitude.
But that's kind of the
hasn't
same as cool.
It
It's
is,
no good
it
way,
is.
but it is.
No.
I think you
It's
just have to
special.
accept
It's
it.
making
It's
you
cool.
feel special,
Yeah.
I think, is really what great designers should be about.
But it looks like a person who doesn't care what other people
Yeah.
think and who just knows that
Her own
they are
style.
Well,
Oh,
again,
that's
great.
then that comes back to confidence.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
know, and I think
It's a
that
very
is
confident
that
word.
is something which runs right the way through from the designer to the person that wants to wear it.
Mm-hmm.
And even if that person isn't confident, by putting it on, it gives them the confidence,
Yes.
which, you know, again, fashion is all about.
Yes.
You know.
Oh, completely.
That's a lovely note to end on, I think. It's very beautifully positive. It's a cool collection. We're all in agreement.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Should we give him another round of
Oh,
applause?
let's.
You're like,
cool though, isn't it?
we're never going to be cool enough.